back in the day when I was part of the team, the vast majority of individuals we selected were from Army, Navy, and Air Force, right? From the three services. And so by and large, you're dealing with individuals who have self-selected to be a part of the team. And that takes a particular kind of breed. By the time when they reach the selection gates of the SAS process, they have gone through several layers of pre-selection already. So in terms of course, physical robustness, but most importantly is that it gave us, and I'm not exaggerating at all, a profound level of compassion, ability to understand other people, capacity to, for me particularly as a geek in psychology, awesome part of our equation is that we managed to walk our way back, escorted by one of our hostage takers not long after. So
hi everybody, Simon here on the Ideal Hour. Today I have a very special guest, a psychologist that was an organizational team and individual resilience, leadership, curiosity, also served in the New Zealand Special Air Forces. So she helped do things with the New Zealand Special Forces that we're going to get into and find out what it takes to be a psychologist on such a level. We're going to hear about performance. We're going to hear about working under stress and duress. And we're also going to hear about some of the experiences she had. Dr. Alia Bojilova. Alia, please pronounce your name. I am so sorry.
Alia Bojilova.
Perfect. It sounds much more beautiful when you say it, by the way. I had the pleasure of also interviewing your husband, Jamie. He was a sweetheart, also in the Special Forces, in the New Zealand Special Forces. And he was just such a great guest. He recommended you'd come on, and I'm honored to have you on. And we get to talk about some really fun things. So let's get into it. What was it like being a psychologist with the New Zealand Special Forces or the Air Forces?
So, Simon, the first thing I'm going to say is I think the first time I've ever seen or heard Jamie being described as a sweetheart is from you. So, let you tell you, working with the likes of Jamie remains one of the most exciting parts of my career and my life. I love what I do. I feel like it's an integral part of my sense of identity, but it has perpetually been the most challenging and the most extraordinary experience. And it remains so, seeing that I am married to one of these individuals I used to work with. But sweetheart, I don't know that he is. I'll work on that.
Only for that hour, he was very nice. I don't know about at home, but or anywhere in the field. I'm sure once he goes out there, it's crazy. So you basically doubled down. Not only did you go to work with these people, but you kind of brought work home because of Jamie. You know what I mean?
Someone had to, you know?
Okay, well, good for you. Tell me about what is it like working with Special Air Force people, and then what is it like being married to one? Since we're on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when I was part of the team, the vast majority of individuals we selected were from Army, Navy, and Air Force, right? From the three services. And so by and large, you're dealing with individuals who have self-selected to be a part of the team. And that takes a particular kind of breed. By the time when they reach the selection gates of the SAS process, they have gone through several layers of pre-selection already. So in terms of course, physical robustness, but most importantly, we used to say that all the time, self-awareness being the selection gate to the SAS process. The ones that would succeed would be able to understand themselves, the triggers, the strengths and vulnerabilities, and ways in which they can pivot away from some of these overpronounced strengths in different conditions way better than anyone could ever teach them. And so I think dealing with individuals who have significant levels of baseline resilience, high levels of self-awareness, remarkable levels of curiosity, which we don't seldom think. It took me several years, by the way. I had stepped away from the team. I came back to do my PhD with the team. And then we realized that curiosity was the single most powerful predictor of success in operations. It's like,
really?
It's curiosity in these guys? Are you kidding me?
Interesting.
So yeah, it's an enormous universe of magic.
Why do you think curiosity played such a big part? Because I'm generally curious, and we kind of talked about all the types of guests we had, and I'm always curious about these things, but I'll get destroyed out there. I don't know. Maybe I don't believe that much of myself in the field, but why is curiosity such a such an important factor or skill set or mindset to have? What makes it so special or distinct versus like a tough guy personality or whatever it is?
I don't know whether tough guy personality would ever make it through, particularly perhaps it's different in different special forces teams, but for ours, it just doesn't gel. It doesn't gel in the context, largely because, I mean, I guess these individuals from the conception of the team were supposed to be able to deploy behind enemy lines without resupply. That's part of the mandate. And that means physical resupply, emotional, spiritual, you name it. And be able to find a way to not just achieve, but also amplify the mission that they have been entrusted with. Now, if you don't have capacity for curiosity and stumble upon an obstacle, which is actually part of your mandate, you can get blocked really quickly, right? And so the ability to ask questions, to wonder whether, to wonder how, to wonder why, to find a common ground, even if it's with your worst adversary, to find a workaround or workabout, that is the predictor. Do you know, it's interesting, we have, I think every member of our team would have had the same person as their long-suffering mentor. With this one person, I'm not sure if Jamie mentioned him in his interview, we call him the Oracle, who used to say, you don't expect it from an individual like that, but he always used to say, you see a problem as a stepping stone in an endless field of opportunities. I mean, it sounds like Alice in Wonderland, especially from that context, but this is what curiosity does. So, you present an issue and it's typically wildly frustrating if you just want the issue to be addressed. But then instantly you get confronted with, I wonder, is it really? Is it an issue? Where is the opportunity? What is the endpoint we want to get to? Let's see if we can find a way under it, around it, above it. I mean, grand to work with. Don't know about being married to one of them 24/7 with these kinds of questions, but it has remarkable effect on capacity to tackle the unknown and actually arrive at a place better than you anticipated.
It's almost as if you're a curious individual, you welcome the challenge of disruption or things that are not as planned, right? That's where you're thriving because you're not only maybe experienced, but you're hoping for such things in terms of development or whatever it may be through life and even in these type of situations.
You see, this is critical, and you said it the same way as they do on their selection interview at the beginning. You've got the selection interview where most people will try and convey some sort of social desirability, right? They want to present the good fit. 99% of the time, the response would be for the challenge. I want to join the team for the challenge. They seek to be challenged. They seek to see what they're made of, to test the metal, as they put it, right? And also to see the extent to which they're capable of contributing if they are in a team of equally peak performing individuals. Now imagine being able to replicate that everywhere. Yeah. Like how many humans step forward and go, I'm here because I wish to be challenged for everything I am,
It's crazy. All right. Well, that was a good start. And then as far as being married to Jamie with this curiosity at home on the light level, I still want to be friends with him. I don't want to look out my window to see if he's in the hills somewhere, going after me. So please give me a little bit about it. I did mention he's a sweetheart. I meant that in a very nice man sort of way. Jamie, I hope you don't get mad at me and your buddies. So please share that with us.
I mean, our relationship is a story of many chapters, but we worked together for a prolonged period of time before we became a couple. And I don't know whether we ever worked together well. So the decision to commence a relationship is, Jamie's an extraordinary human being. And I think it wouldn't surprise you, but for any member of the team, focus on detail whilst maintaining capacity to see the bigger picture all at the same time. It's a capability that took me a long time to appreciate. It's exhausting because most of us tend to kind of focus on one or the other. but yeah, it's a remarkable journey being married to someone who seeks to find both of these at the same time.
That is wonderful. And he had very kind words to say about you and your patience as well on when we did the podcast. And we'll share a link to that podcast as well. Jamie was awarded a medal, and you were awarded several commendations here. So you received the service medal and also a United Nations commendation. How did that feel? Was that part of any specific tour, or what, for your career, what did that mean to you?
I don't know whether it's a New Zealand Defence Force thing, but medals are very uncomfortable things for us. So it never feels right to receive one. And Jamie's medals, by all means, beyond well-deserved. I don't give him compliments ever, but he certainly does deserve that. Mine, do you know why I got given the medals?
I don't. If you could share with me, that would be great. Please.
So my team, so both of these medals that you mentioned, the Meritorious Service Medal and the UN Commendation I received, my team that I served with in Syria said that these were the medals for talking too much. And just, I'm sure in the 2.5 minutes we've chatted, it's not going to shock and surprise you. So to that end, well deserved. But what they were attributed to in that context is in 2012 and 2013, I was selected to serve in quite an awesome mission. Probably the top of the wish list of UN military missions on a planet that we have. It's called ANSO, and it serves across 5 different countries: Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, Syria, and Egypt. Okay. And I was selected to serve in Syria, in quite a happening place. And so 2 things: the team I was with reported that they had very high morale, which is a big deal, particularly in the circumstances. We were in 2013, there was so much happening, and this is a very well-established mission that had been running for some time. But the level of agility that was there on the ground, systemically, was zilch to none. And so without mentioning names, I recall one of our commanders at the time, who were reporting on escalating levels of risk and acuity. And I remember him distinctly popping in to visit with us because we were trying to send the alarm bell and saying, we need to kind of be pulled away from here. We're in a bit of a pickle. Yeah. Stacks is what we called it. And I remember him distinctly showing up with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth and saying, "It is what it is." So that's lasted with me as the most peculiar kind of command decision of that. The best way to boost morale for your troops is to say, "It is what it is."
I think I'm going to use that with every chore I have to do for the rest of my life.
Just say it with that tone and then it stick. But in May 2013, 3 of us, unarmed, were taken hostage by allegedly 38 heavily armed military militia members. And hostage taking in Syria in particular was not new. What was new was that we were taken from a UN position. Oh, wow. And that basically signaled that the big blue badge and the flag no longer mattered.
They didn't care.
So, yeah. But what was interesting is to see how quickly people can care. So when they took us hostage, they signaled to us that they wanted to make a bad video of us. And videos of decapitation were.
I remember they were common in that time period. They would have like a weird screen or background or a curtain, but did the hostage takers care that you were with UN, or was it like an advantage play for them?
I mean, we were a perfect little bunch to pick up. Because we had 3 nationalities, experienced officers. That creates a really interesting diplomatic kind of focus point, right? You've got 3 countries represented in 3 individuals, unarmed, in the middle of nowhere, sitting under a flag that is globally recognized as a superpower. So you couldn't ask for anything better, right? If you wanted to make a point.
For attention as well. And
so they very much see it, but not so much to our benefit. You know?
Do you want to go more into that? I mean, that is a horrific scene to feel, to process. I mean, I can't imagine it. If you could share the mindset, is it like, do you question my life is going to be over? This is it? Or are you hopeful in that moment? How did you survive? How did you keep others calm and yourself calm? Or how did others keep you calm? And I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, and we could skip it if you want, but I'm curious, like at that moment, what goes through a person's mind, and I'm sure others are as well.
I think this, without underestimating any of the negative experiences, this truly was an extraordinary gift for us, because I mean, the tail end of the story is that it gave us, and I'm not exaggerating at all, a profound level of compassion, ability to understand other people, capacity to, for me particularly as a geek in psychology. I mean, imagine that. You get one of these scenarios and you're thinking to yourself, this is my opportunity to test the checklist that I've been studying and trying to convince others would work in situations like that. I didn't think about the checklist consciously at the time, to be fair. Our situation was one of shock and awe because we were snatched in the middle of the night. So we had this lovely, beautiful observation post, a tiny concrete building perched up on top of the hill. But what was absurd about our situation is that we were very close to the technical fence, the area that separates Israel and Syria. And so on a good day, the idea was that you can load yourself into your lovely UN vehicle and very quickly cross to the fence, open the gate, open magically because you are in a UN vehicle, and off you are onto safety. But it hadn't been a good day for a long time, and the gate would be locked shut constantly because there was constant tension and internal fighting. So the irony of our situation is that we could see safety, you could almost smell it, you could hear it, but you couldn't reach it. And that's a nasty thing, right?
Wow.
Like, you're not here being, the second layer to it is that there was an Israeli position not far from where we were taken. And I think the primary function was to watch us watching the peace between Israel and Syria. I think the level of trust perhaps wasn't particularly high. They knew about our predicament or what was about to happen to us, but they couldn't communicate with us directly because that violated the agreement of disengagement. And so by the time when I remember waking up actually in the middle of the night by the sound of what I felt were foxes barking. I don't know if you've had these weird moments.
Incredible. I haven't heard of fox. Well, there's not too many around the Bay Area that in the city-like area, but tell me the sound, describe that.
I don't think it was, I mean, I've meant to Google this for 11 years now, and I haven't had the time to do so, but for some reason, I mean, there's a lot of foxes in the area, and for some reason in my mind, imagine that you're sleeping there, minding your own business, just being calm individual in the middle of the night. And suddenly, because the area we were in was so isolated, the sounds didn't connect with the environment. And I remember thinking this to myself and then going, is this even possible? What is going on? And so by the time when I heard the Mayday call from my colleague who was on duty that night, we had already had a whole ton of individuals climbing over our fences, smashing through windows, and pointing gun at our faces. But in some respects, we were lucky because, so I had myself, my colleague was sending a Mayday call at the time. So I positioned myself right in front of the smashed window to see what the whole cacophony was about. And I noticed an individual who looked like he didn't belong in the environment. He had a long beard. His eyes were quite kind, but also a little afraid looking. And it's these tiny little micro moments where you go, you don't quite fit the picture of an angry individual about to chop my head off. So you get these small little moments like that. So he was an interpreter, perhaps a teacher from a local village, snatched by them to serve that very purpose.
And he had no choice, possibly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There were also small little things like, so they pointed, a bazooka-like thing at a door, which was a bit of an overkill because, it was a wooden door. You didn't have to go that far. But at that point we realized that we had to let them in and volunteer ourselves for whatever was happening next, so that we don't escalate where we were. And there was another one of those peculiar moments. So, you get the fear surge, you get that feeling of near miss, of blood rushing to your nose, and the feeling of, everything is beginning to move. And then if you pay attention, you begin to notice the tiny little doors opening. Like we had one of the individuals that came to grab my wrists. I distinctly remember that his hands were sweaty, and it was a very cold night in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
And so I assumed he was stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, here's a little window. So within about, I don't know, a minute and a half, there were two tiny windows just slightly left ajar for us to explore,
Interesting. And,
Yeah.
and that's where I would imagine all of your training and skills and understanding the human mind and body gave you an opportunity. Did you talk to them at any point, or were they non-talkative? And how long were you captive for? I don't know your story, so I'm so curious. The way you've described it is like a movie. What are those
Yeah.
more?
I mean, it was an interesting piece. It took, we tried to barter with them for a period of time. So communication was open, but it wasn't successful initially. They were determined to extract us. There's so many little moments, these ridiculous moments. I'll share with you one other that created a huge morale boost for us. So earlier that day, myself and my colleague Miko were training just because we had nothing better to do. We were doing some, burpees and that sort of stuff just to keep ourselves entertained on this 2x2 concrete block. And we were blasting from our little speaker. I don't know if you know a band called The Prodigy.
Okay. Yep. I've heard of them.
Good. You
Yep,
should listen to them because it's the perfect thing for training. And it was one track that went along the lines of, we walk through the minefields. So 15 hours later, the three of us were dragged through minefields that were supposed to protect our observation post in the middle of the night. And we could not remember that we were clenching our teeth because we were thinking, this is gonna hurt. But we're clenching our teeth to protect our dentures, and you're thinking, let's just. And so there was this really ugly sort of experience of being pushed and ushered and probed and forced and into a minefield, and at the same time glancing a look at your mate, realizing how ridiculous your initial reaction is. But Miko did something delicious. He turned around to me and said, dude, we are doing it for real. And all of a sudden you have this moment of like, okay, humor and humility has an exceptional capacity to create this tiny unlock.
Humor.
Humor and humility. And it's sort of that ability that it doesn't matter how bad your predicament might look like, you can walk yourself down this nasty little spiral of negative thinking, or you can allow yourself small little moments of, kind of dissonance and go, wait a second, we could have a hand up on this. Like we could create a tiny moment for ridiculousness, even if the situation looks completely absurd. And then you have a surge of endorphins. Mm-hmm. And then you're stuck in this moment of laughing at your own predicament and the ridiculousness of the whole thing. And by that stage, you've won a minute. You've won a minute of optimism and hope.
And that minute probably goes such a long way. You've mentioned overlooking kind of freedom or the border earlier and kind of being trapped, knowing that here's safety, here's not. It reminded me of the time I visited Alcatraz here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, where the jail cell, the way the inmates described it was they could see people or hear people with the winds carrying the sound partying on the other side of the bay, yet they're trapped. So it's like a mental mind challenge, I should say. I was going to say a different word, but it's a mental mind challenge. And it reminded me of that. So how long did the hostages keep you captive? The hostage takers, keep you captive for? How did you ultimately end up getting rescued? Or was there a prisoner swap, or what did they do?
The awesome part of our equation is that we managed to walk our way back, escorted by one of our hostage takers not long after. So, yeah. Yeah. So initially we
Wow.
were held in a abandoned village near the area we were taken. And basically the way in which after a little while, we were able to establish that there was an opportunity for us to have a report to discuss not what it is that you want to do, which didn't change,
Hmm.
but why it is that you want to do it. What sits behind it for you? And the unlocks were countless little moments of unlocks leading up to it. So instead of focusing on the why or how or when, it was kind of a lift up to the level of why. What is the actual intent, and how can we help you get to that intent and hold our heads on our shoulders?
Wow.
Um, and it seemed instinctive, to be honest, because the whole picture didn't quite connect. We knew what these individuals were capable of. We'd studied them for a period of time. We had witnessed and experienced ourselves the acute level of um, confusion, pain, frustration that comes together with watching areas being besieged and civilians suffering greatly. And we
Mhm.
knew a number of them were part of it. For example, some of our guard forces, the guard group that we had, looked like they were 13-year-old kids, and they were holding
Mm.
weapons in all the wrong ways. So these were the moments of concerns we had. It's like, you'll injure yourself before you cause me pain. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
this is not the way to hold a gun. But you had little moments like this, thinking this is a mismatched, deprived entity that clearly runs on some kind of emotion that needs to be recognized. Um, you know, hence when we were eventually released, my team said that I asked so many questions about how people felt and why they want to chop our heads off, that they were like, you know what, she will not stop, she will not shut up. Send them back, get someone else.
Yeah, you talked yourself to freedom by not stopping. That's kind of funny. My daughter talks a lot as well, and I think now I'm learning that this is a very good thing. um, what? How did you break into? You mentioned figuring out not what but why, kind of getting to the core of what they're doing, and do they really want to do this? I would imagine is and how you can help the hostage taker. Um, but how did you pick out the person to build that relationship with, or start that discussion? And how did you feel if they want to have that type of discussion without getting them angry and having them lose their temper? As you mentioned, they're going into it seeing horrific things, hating you off the bat, off the start, and really there to do a very bad thing to an
Mm.
individual, another human. At what point was the breaking point, or does it take several kind of chips at the rock to get to the core of it, and really start a discussion with a hostage negotiation scene where you're fighting for your life and you're walking on eggshells, and you're doing everything possible to not anger that individual because they could explode and they're in control.
I'm sure absolutely every situation is different, and every moment in every situation is unique, right? But in our case, it was very much of a cumulative approach. We were getting mixed messages. We were getting different displays of emotion from different people, but you kind of, even without having a clear language comprehension, you can very clearly see who is in charge relatively quickly, right? And so how other people relate to them and how they related to us instantly demonstrates ranking within the team. So you can see how to get there. The pathway in our case, again, every case is very
Mhm.
specific, but in our case, we don't know how. I don't clearly remember how. There's countless opportunities in which I probably have angered people in this situation. But there was one moment where we were having a discussion, or I was trying to start a discussion with someone who was left in our guard at that point, and someone else stepped forward and opened up what looked like a wallet with a photo of family members inside of it, and he said they're all gone. And that was a moment of noticing aggression and anger as well as pain, and instantly, I mean, the only thing you can do is sympathize.
Mhm.
And so that sympathy unleashed the kind of the sharing of the fact that they saw us as being effectively impotent, right? Unable to do anything of consequence, driving around, observing human suffering, reporting on it without necessarily being able to prevent it. And we agreed because we experienced that same thing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There was a curious moment where one of the older individuals in the group emerged. We still don't know whether he meant to show us this word, but he emerged and showed us a word, the word humility in English Arabic dictionary. And that was, so you've got these little odd moments in between that are like, did we demonstrate it? Are you demonstrating it? Is this the word that you mean to show me? But you don't want to ask these kinds of questions, you kind of little wins along the way. They had obtained one of our radios actually from our packs. We took our go bags with us just in case. And that's when we could establish communication with our commander and secure for them audience with the general of the UN mission the following morning. So this is what created the unlock for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
And at that time, were you, was Jamie and you a couple, or this is well before he was, oh my gosh.
Well, we were, and can I tell you another funny story about a friend?
Yes.
So the story goes that when my boss in Israel, so Jamie was in Israel, I was in Syria, and so we would see each other every couple of weeks. And Jamie was taking a little bit of time to do a study leave. The story goes that when the commander knocked on his door to tell him that we've been in a predicament, and they're hopeful that we are making our way back, Jamie asked, "Did she follow drill?" Can you believe? You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of checkpoint in his mind that, I was like, okay, if she'd followed the drill, then she'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
maybe he was a disbelief.
So there's a bit of a competition in the family around what drill should be and who does it better.
So did you follow the drill he thought you should have followed, or was it?
We rewrote it. We wrote a whole new drill, and it's the winning.
Okay, good. All right. Well, that is an incredible experience that few. I've never interviewed someone that's had such an experience. I mean, I've been in like weird experiences growing up as a kid, kind of feeling by myself and being around dangerous people. I've seen people with guns, but at no point, I think once you're taken out of your, what to me and maybe to others makes your experience so scary is that you're taken out of your element of what you know around. Like if you're in a bad area, you're probably still in a safe area nearby. Maybe you're in a bad neighborhood. Maybe you're in a bad situation. There's a group of guys, whatever. But you're still in your city or your common area. When you're kind of taken out of the area that you know is home or nearby home, it's probably frightening. So I appreciate you sharing some of the tactics you use to kind of pass time and also level the playing field and boost the morale. Is there anything else you want to add for anytime someone maybe is going through a weird situation, not necessarily a situation that you're in, but I've picked up humor, humility, keeping the mind busy in some ways. What else as a psychologist would you recommend someone maybe does, or what did you do that helped during that time?
So I've loved looking into, luckily not many of us get to go through situations like these, right? But the truth of the matter is that most of us experience a far greater version of acute because we cannot respond in a way that is, you know what I mean? Like if you have a grumpy boss, or you're frustrated because of inflation, or I don't know, political turmoil, or any of these things, and suddenly you get one other thing that happens, that feeling of entrapment, that feeling of losing control over your own life. I mean, COVID, post-COVID reality, and all the layers of change and ambiguity that have accumulated for people lead to similar physiological responses than the ones that we had. The truth of the matter is, when you are in physical level of acute such as ours, typically, 90% of the you kind of are a bit more focused, right? Because your options are very, very black and white. You're not gonna, unless you're really determined to, you're not gonna play dead, right? You're gonna want to steal a moment. But most of what we deal with is a great deal more confronting because you don't necessarily have the yay or nay response. You have a whole plethora of gray in between. So I get to witness this constantly in countless different contexts with peak performers and teams. And it's infuriating that the things we miss or kind of lose the most is the ability to allow ourselves that indulgence of time. When we are rushed, there is always a micro moment you can steal to pause, reflect, select your intent, and orient more meaningfully and more intentionally towards what it is that you want to achieve. And that is the blunt reality of it. I see it in interactions with people. I see it in confirmation bias that happens, that escalating effect of anxiety and worry or rumination about things that you have no control or influence over. It's all within our fingertips.
Wow.
Because it's your attitude, and I know we have all heard it, and it's frustratingly pop psych-like, but it is the blunt reality. You have an opportunity to influence, even if it is something as little as your own state of being, in a tiny micro moment. You pick that one, another one becomes readily available or more readily available. You connect these two. Here is your elevated state. And it's from that place that you can think, feel, and act differently and more intentionally select how you want to pivot.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It's like improving on a different level, 1% every day. You're going to see the result of what you're improving, or even 0.5% or whatever it is. One small little improvement leads to what you're saying is a connection that's going to elevate your state of mind to a more positive state of mind. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about psychology, why you chose it, because it was my favorite topic. I didn't go to four-year university, but I chose to do business. But I did take psychology in like community college or the junior college, and I loved it. It was so intriguing. I got an A, but I was just always curious how the mind worked and how people react, and always how I could overcome things myself and so forth. Why did you choose psychology for yourself? What drew you to psychology?
I mean, have you ever had the experience that I genuinely haven't worked a day in my life since I started formally studying? I was like, it is truly the most fascinating thing to me, at least, is trying to understand why it is that we do what we do. And most importantly, of recent, discovering ways in which we could do so much better with the stuff that matters. So one thing I keep trying to explain to my long-suffering husband is that with my field, I feel like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like a rabbit on treadmill. Like I feel like I can never know enough. I can never catch up. I can never quite create as quickly as we should the momentum that we have within our fingertips, that we can create to shift biases and attitudes that hold us back from thriving. So, like it or not, we are kind of the pivot point for so many meaningful outcomes that influence not just us, but also everything around us. And so I couldn't think.
Sorry to interrupt. I think now more than ever, with the ever-changing, not only world migration, but also artificial intelligence coming in, it's such an interesting time. So continue, please. I just wanted to add that to with now more than ever, you were finishing. There's so many outcomes potentially.
You are so right, and you see, they all cascade really quickly. And I think if you pay attention, you can see that similar responses emerge, whether the threat is perceived to come from the wild and wonderful world of AI or environmental change. And so what I get to see constantly is temptation to stay in the white noise of distraction and temporary fix, like limited fixed solutions and petty emotion, and recognizing at the same time through empathy that this is a normal human response to what is perceived as unsurmountable. So the reason why I started psychology, to be honest with you, formally studying it, is because I wanted to take a break from law school. But it was a no-brainer, and it's just a never-ending journey of opening and unlocking, and most importantly, serving. Like, I feel like I serve every day, which is incredibly important to me.
Yeah, I think you chose a better profession than being a lawyer, personally. Now, what is, for those, including myself, I don't know too much about organizational psychology and team psychology. Obviously, I get the concept, but I know there's layers to it. And can you give us an understanding of what that is versus maybe general psychology and so forth? And then we'll go into why you joined this SAS and decided to pursue that in the military.
Yeah. I mean, organizational psychology has a probably an ugly history, to be honest, because it focuses on maximizing human performance. And the minute you think of that, it's kind of like, oh, there's a nuance to it that is a little bit kind of paternalistic-like, or like, tries to dictate how humans ought to conduct themselves to extract the most out of them. That's what I think is the dark side of organizational psychology, the way in which most of us view it. In my time in the field, the focus has exclusively been on ensuring that we create the conditions within which human potential can thrive. We have pivoted significantly over time on things that used to be almost unspeakable, like well-being in the workplace, those boring subjects that poor HR individuals seem to be tasked with communicating to busy CEOs, right? But I'm blessed because I work in between spaces. So I work on this thing called the Figure Eight. So I work with some really powerful and influential organizations and teams that then allow me the freedom and the time and the funding, to be blunt, to work in the not-for-profit space, where the focus is unapologetically creating the conditions within which capacity for creativity, talent is not, like, the most frustrating thing is like wasting human potential, right? Wasting creative potential because of poorly designed contexts or clumsy egos. And so the intervention point in my work is in that place. How do we create the rules of engagement, the conditions within which humans can thrive and contribute in the most meaningful way? And so I can't speak of some of the more traditional organizations that exist, because there's often so many system structures and processes that construe that freedom. But in my environments, the commitment is a no-brainer. And it's essential because no one can afford to deplete human potential, to deplete enjoyment and sense of purpose and access to purpose in work. In fact, the opposite is absolutely vital.
In a team environment, in a corporation, let's say, is there correlation between their performance and then the same performance of a SAS soldier or someone in special forces? Is it kind of the same structure where there's the team lead and so forth? Or is it completely different? Because one, obviously, there's a life risk involved versus a monetary risk. So I don't know if room for error in one is more amplified, so to speak. You have to be more cautious. But if you could share that, that'd be something I'm curious about.
So, I keep wanting to be surprised. I step in every new context I work with the hope and expectations that I'll be wildly surprised and that this thing is going to work in a very different way. And the blunt reality is that the same principles that applied in special forces teams that support peak performance, capacity for thriving, not just survivability, and not just the ability to absorb pressure, but grow through it and iterate to a better alternative. The same rules apply. And I love the reality is, yes, in some contexts, it's life and limb threat, but that galvanizes a whole heap easier. And the truth is, in many other contexts, reputation, professional reputation in particular, can feel just as dangerous to lose as does a life or limb. It's the same thing.
Wow.
I do work with a couple of ex operators, and the favorite phrase is, "It's the same day, David." It's the same rules apply. Self-awareness, interpersonal awareness, situational awareness. What obstructs that? Capacity for belonging. Nothing fluffy. I mean, the fluffy is probably there, but it's about that ability to align. And my team always steps on the back of the spine. Does your spine of belief actually align with what it is that you have been you're imagining you sign up to? To what extent do you have access to curiosity? Can you question things that have been set up for you, or do you have to just zip it and handle it, which intelligent human beings don't handle well? And the final one being drive,
Can I add to that? I mean, we talked a little bit about COVID, and this whole concept was very recently, and in fact, a couple of days ago, Mark Zuckerberg admitted to censoring COVID. I don't know if you read this, but like COVID data, professional doctors, and so forth on these social media platforms, working with the government. With that time period, do you think it was healthy or unhealthy for people to not be able to question or be curious about whether they should take a vaccine, should not, whether they should believe this or not, and so forth? And what did that whole period do to the development or disaster, I should say, of the mind in a lot of individuals? I mean, we were kind of locked up. We weren't allowed to question things and be curious. And you mentioned earlier that it's not healthy potentially to not be curious or questioning things. What do you think is the fallout of this test that maybe the government had done?
Profound mistrust that has ripple down effects with countless different labels. And I don't know whether and how we will ever recover from it. But the blunt reality is, irrespective of where someone sits on some objective scale of curiosity, absolutely everyone questions. Whether they are allowed to vocalize the questions or not, it doesn't seize them. And so in the absence of being able to communicate concerns, inquire, explore, have, a creative discourse, if you wish, around a thing, what ends up becoming is, we are creating this really polarized context where the spiral down effect of rumination and worry emerges. And then, of course, you've got the speculative twinge that each and every one of us has, So it's inevitable. Humans, if they're healthy, question. Even ones that have been conditioned in the context that I grew up in, kind of totalitarian context. And so I think the worst thing we could do is seize that. I appreciate that it was probably convenient and easier to manage administratively.
Yeah.
You're dealing transactional efficiency for human health and curiosity.
Not a good thing.
Not an epic solution, is it? Yeah.
Well, I also worry about the development of children in that regard, for questioning and being curious, because for a long period, and some of them may be generational, a certain generation, to not be able to have to hold back, not question, to follow, only breeds potentially a more dangerous, similar situation that can happen in the future, where now they're already pre-trained to not question and follow. So I worry about that. And I know you have a child, or one or two kids? One,
yeah.
yes. Jamie mentioned he's in jiu-jitsu, which is awesome. That's interesting, and thank you for sharing that. You grew up in Bulgaria, is that correct?
I did.
All
yes.
right. How was your childhood? You mentioned briefly your childhood there. Originally, my parents are from Russia. So my dad briefly told me about the collapse and so forth. How was it growing up there? And do you feel like it built resilience with you to work harder or do things here in New Zealand in this case, or anywhere else around the world that you get to live or visit?
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting. I visited Bulgaria again in January this year, and it was one thing that was astonishing, maybe not too astonishing, but I was thinking about the sort of brutalist architecture of the time. I went to visit the actual building that I grew up in, and remembered how it replicated much of the attitudes and behaviors that I'd witnessed en masse, right? And what the contexts that are put in a state of perceived or actual deprive for prolonged periods of time due to human nature, right? I'm lucky because my childhood was a game of two halves, right? I had the upbringing in very kind of strict, demanding, like if you're not at the top of your game, you shouldn't be seen on the street kind of attitude, right? You succeed at everything or else. The contrast to that was my every holiday and every weekend I spent in a village where my father comes from, 6 centuries of heritage in that place. And the childhood I had was the one that I wish my son had, which was spending your whole time chasing one truck tire. There's like me and 6 of our cousins. That's all we did all day long. You know what I mean? That someone still owns it in the family over there.
Oh,
That's how
that's so cool.
You know, building dams down the river and trying to work out how quickly you can jump off the wall and whether you can execute a sweet jump that can beat someone else. You know, like that sort of stuff. The simplicity of it was extraordinary. I think the context, as brutal as it seemed, also ignited capacity for connection between people, the likes of which I haven't seen in the Western world. COVID,
I agree.
by the way. And you know what's really interesting? I mean, you know, you get all these stories. It's a little bit like Animal Farm, you know, George Orwell. I can read it and I can see where mystical kind of overlays with reality. But I distinctly remember a period of time when we had electricity shortcuts. And this was naturally, as it should be, in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, right? Just to keep the population under control. But awesome things would happen. You know, we had apartment on level 5, this concrete blunt apartment on level 5, and the people from level 4 and level 6 will come down to level 5 and will bring the one gas cooker that we could share between us, and we'll play music and we'll have candles, and suddenly you realize that it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're asleep on the floor with, it's just that kind of organic. You know, if someone has sugar, it's the greatest thing in the universe. So we had this code with our central heating system, which never worked. If that's something good, they'll bang on the central heating pipes, like to say where the goodness is. So like you get 2 and everyone rushes down to level 2 to see whether we had bread or, you know, toilet paper. There was a toilet paper crisis, for goodness sakes, at one point.
You'd be lucky if living in America, if you know your neighbor in some places nowadays, and everybody's so closed off. I think what you described is kind of what I had as well growing up in Russia. It was a little village where you would build your little race car out of pieces of wood and some casters or something like this. And then, you know, creativity would run wild, right? Nowadays, I feel like the kids are not present in the moment, and I'm starting to see it happen to adults as well. Very, very distracted with the phone. So it really takes away, I think technology in a way, it gives us a lot of resources, but I think you may agree, it just takes away your connection and it takes away your creativity. Do you think that's accurate? Do you feel children nowadays are just no longer experiencing what we were naturally supposed to do, as be in nature and really grow up in a more creative environment?
I couldn't agree with you more. Now that sterile, constrained, controlled environment we are creating is brutal. I don't think we can ever outrun what evolutionary kind of needs we have, particularly for young individuals, or young children in particular. You said connection and creativity. I don't understand how a healthy human can develop without having a solid felt understanding of the power of these two things. Capacity for connection, to see yourself in different contexts, to explore, to co-create, to fuel different shifts and change. I mean, we live on a farm here in New Zealand, and I observe my son with his 1,000 little mates, how they change the mission from one moment to the next because someone had an even better idea. You know, like the other day, I lost them for 6 hours. They they had a spoon, and all they'd spent the 6 hours doing is creating a drainage system around the hut out of like random shrubs.
That's so
That's
cool.
right. The
Yeah.
stuff of magic, the conversations in that space, the creativity you speak of, absolutely essential. What we do is we create this, again, that focus. Focus is essential, right? When focus breaks down, decision making breaks down, capacity for connection with other people breaks down, because the thought is life is elsewhere. Now, I work with a lot of young individuals, teenagers and up to 25 as well, as part of our not-for-profits. And you could see these things that are being widely reported: increase of anxiety, worry, suicidal ideation, loss of sense of agency. That is brutal, right?
Yep.
The idea that I can influence my own state and experience with my own actions, gone. Like, that is just, it's
tough to overcome. You wrote a book, The Resilience Toolkit. Let's talk a little bit about resilience, because obviously you have to be resilient in today's world to combat technology or anything else that's going on. There's just so much being thrown at us. I would say the mind is overstimulated with news and all these platforms. What are some key factors that contribute to any type of resilient behavior, resilience in general? In any type of situation. Obviously, there's different situations, different scenarios. But what about resilience? What are some key factors, or what should people do? Say they're battling inflation, they're battling politics, they're battling today's modern world and all the things that are being thrown at us in every direction.
Yeah. Resilience is such an overused word, and I'm beginning to see it being used in selection. It has been for the longest of time, right? One of the big failure points in the way in which we have understood it is that we have perceived it to be a trait, something you either have or you don't, as opposed to a state. That's wildly problematic, right? Because it doesn't matter what level of hardiness you come with. That's the other thing. People confuse it with hardiness, and that's the sort of stuff that belongs to metallurgy. Like, how much can you handle before you break? That's not the aim of the exercise. Another thing that's front of mind is that we always think of it as the ability to bounce back and recover. But what we get to see with the likes of COVID and all of the environmental impact points we have had over the last little while is that oftentimes the thing you think you should be bouncing back to is no longer there, or is no longer good enough. So what I'm deeply obsessed over recreating for us, or reminding us of, is the critical importance of protecting, preserving, and expanding this thing we all have in abundance, and understanding the authentic way in which we can allow resilience to thrive. It is, as much as I'm bored of the word, it is an essential thing for us to have, right? Because it supports your capacity to reason, to connect, to create, all essential things. But what it takes, I kind of fancy it because I spent so much of my life researching it like a proper geek. And then with some of the work that I've done with my teams, they help simplify it to something that is Sesame Street simple. So like this beautiful science shrinked into a 4-letter abbreviation, which is, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it so happens to be landing perfectly in a space of something we call ABCD, right? Awareness, belonging, curiosity, and drive. And so I come back to the SAS or the experiences in the research we did with them when I think of awareness. And a really gorgeous heuristic they use is mind where your mind goes, right? You mentioned that you were talking about bad news, like bad news that are designed to hold our attention, because of course we prefer that to the thought that someone can be issuing out lovely roses down the street, right? So knowing that our tendency is to have negativity bias, doubly so when we are focus deprived and scattered. The job to be done is to notice the times when our negativity has taken over, when we are in a state of rumination or worry as opposed to present. The most challenging thing is to allow yourself the freedom to select how you choose to feel, think, and act, and to appreciate that you have the freedom to do so in the direction of your goal.
Wow.
So minding where your mind goes, creating tiny moments of disruption when you notice yourself in that kind of negative pathway, choosing choosing where you focus your attention is absolutely critical, right? The second one I love, belonging. We've overused that word as well, and it's done poorly a lot of the time. But it's having really clear understanding of what it is that your why is, your own personal why, right? The spine of belief that holds you together. And there's something else we're forgetting too. Again, from the SS research we did all these years ago, that heuristic still lasts, which is belong and make better. Not just knowing who it is that you are and what drives and sustains you, but allowing yourself micro moments to improve someone else's lot, even if it's by a tiny bit. That comes back to that thing of agency, because if you can influence someone else's lot or improve something else, then your resilience baseline is protected for that much longer, right?
Wow.
Curiosity. Yeah, I could speak about this thing for months, but it's that thing that the essays do so well. Is
I could listen to you forever. Jamie's one lucky man. I got to tell you, I just love this stuff. So, how key is it? Mind where your mind goes. That's what I wrote down. It's so important. But I'm also been noting a lot some playfulness and humor to create those little distractions, as you mentioned. I think you used a different term for it, but how in the SAS and maybe in the workspace, do you notice effective leaders have a playful personality to them at certain times, or are they more, drill sergeant like, and give me your perspective on that, if you may.
It seems to be the case that people seldom speak of the grumpy drill sergeant type leader with affection until way past the point of interaction. I mean, kind of that feeling that you have to find something to love about someone you spend time with. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to change selection criteria for leadership or, critical leaders and say that everyone has to have a bit of a joyful nuance to themselves, but at the very least, not taking themselves too seriously. That can connect beautifully with humility, right? Yeah. It's the disconnect that is created through this enormous inflated spiky egos that we think we should have created, that kind of, shoulder pad 80s mentality. Nobody ever loved them. And I don't know whether anyone had said anything about that over time, because I think we've indulged in it a little too long. So agreed. Ability to find moments in humor signals curiosity, baseline resilience, and also intellect, right? If you can think your way out of that little moment, it means that you have some control over what for an average beer, might be a fixed solution, right?
I agree. And in terms of resilience in, say, I had a good question I wrote down here, and it was preventing burnout. I think that was a really good thing as we're getting close to wrap up, but resilience and preventing burnout. A lot of people nowadays, I feel like with inflation and everything that's happening, kids, more females are going into the workforce, and they're working and still being a full-time mom, full-time work, and the father nowadays working both and also helping with the children. Tends to be a little bit of a burnout with the job requirements, with the family requirements, home requirements. Does resilience, the same type of resilience, apply to that, or is there any advice you could give to me and everybody else out there to help with burnout and to keep burnout maybe under control? What would you think are some effective ways to manage that in a generalized scenario, I guess?
There are so many, and that book you mentioned, the Resilience Toolkit, does focus a great deal on that, right? Because it is rife, burnout. So is our temptation to feel as if we have to live in a way that is hurried, scattered, and constantly preoccupied. And that never works well for psychological well-being. So if we care to have any life worth living, the job to be done, well, actually, there are two jobs, right? And both of them are super simple, so simple that unfortunately busy, scattered, burned out brains reject. We all know it. So focusing on your baseline, negotiating or trying to stretch your baseline way past your point of flexibility leads to nothing but breaking. And so in our context, we used to call it mind what you've got in your go bag. Like most of us try to be all tranquil and Lululemon-like yoginis whilst holding 1,000 folders full of dusty content on our heads. It's a no-go zone. It just does not, a healthy human does not conduct themselves well in that environment. Being very conscious about what you focus on, what you choose to become a part of your daily repertoire, and then when you engage in something, being intentionful with it. This is something we do insane level of service for ourselves with, right? We're pretending that we are spending time with children, meanwhile thinking about the email, that boring stuff, email and the shopping list that has to be created. That could not possibly excite you, right?
No.
So I don't know if this is a Dr. Zeus thing or SAS thing, but wherever you are, there you are. You know what I mean? Like,
I love these terms. I'm writing them all down.
Right. So just allowing it's the sweetest sensation when you practice these little moments of absolute intention-full engagement in the moment. It's extraordinary how tiny breaks of full focus, full attention, full immersion in your experience, be that boiling potatoes or cuddling your child, creates such huge energy boost. And then is the non-negotiable basics, sleep, diet, training. No one ever made it out well without those things. We pretend that we are in that we're in constant stressed environment. But we choose where our attention goes. We have that luxury, we're not held hostage by anything by our own will. So there's some big choices to be made by all of us.
It's amazing how people, what's really interesting is how in culture, and you mentioned Lululemon and the fit environment, and it's very interesting how culture, maybe in the Western states right now, in the Western world, they are somewhat encouraging unhealthy behavior, or not as teaching that you should exercise, you should get some vitamin D in the sun and so forth. And it's all being watered down as important with subscriptions or prescriptions, I should say, to drugs to make you feel better. I mean, we know why, both of you and I would imagine it's a financial gain for these companies, but it's almost to the point where if you say something to a person that does need that hard talk of, hey, you need to get yourself back in shape and you need to start breathing and practicing breathing and walking and running and so forth, you're kind of body shaming them, or you're being mean, or whatever it may be. Why do you think society has accepted to teach our kids that, exercise is not really that important? And I'm noticing a lot of kids, when I was in school, a lot of kids were thinner. And if you look back 40 years, there wasn't really many obese people. Now I know it's what we eat, but why do you think society is accepting it?
I think that we are doing it subconsciously. We are doing it without pausing to ask questions and choosing the direction of our movement forward. And we are choosing a whole heap of stuff that is, think about it, sedentary lifestyle. I don't know about you and you growing up in Russia, but in Bulgaria, we had one TV, and it was, I don't know if it was just us that had it or whether other floors had it, but you only had the news and some sort of ridiculous cartoon that nobody watched right after. That's it.
I recall it. No remote control, 4 channels, and there was a rotary knob, and you'd be lucky if it doesn't go. So.
So there's this stuff like nobody tells you have to be doing these things. You're choosing it to fit into something you think you need to be like, look like, act like. So I think it's beyond sinful. And I think if you're thinking about sports, the fact that so much of that is now organized, orchestrated with like outcome in mind, like my son's Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He has to go there and he has to win a medal at a competition. But it's a great deal more fun to be playing, to be exploring. We had that freedom. I don't know if the generations that we are living with now do. There's been so much research out there on children free playing, without adult supervision and our perceptions of risk increasing when apparently it's significantly lower than it has been for previous generations. It's wild.
You know, when I competed in jiu-jitsu, that was my mindset as well. You got to win. If you don't win, it's so much stress and so forth. And I personally learned to just, there's levels to it. Obviously, just like a basketball player and so forth, or a tennis player. How do you teach your son, because I hope to get my kid in it one day, to not worry about winning so much and more in line of enjoying and being playful or creative? What do you say to him to kind of encourage him to not focus on just gold, if that makes sense?
For a second, I was going to say, have you met my husband?
I know I have, but that's, you know, I think that's what balances you guys out. I'm sure he's like, get him. And you're like, well, you're there for the fun of the moment, you know, enjoy it.
I mean, serendipitously, I think Alex learns a great deal more when he's in a state of exploration, joyful state, ridiculousness. Ridiculousness seems to be the easiest pathway for him to actually chill and perform at his best in every domain. And I watch that with our godchildren as well. We have abundance of them. But when I'm thinking about it, you know, there's that good old thing of you either win or you learn. And so my personal bias at all times is to check in and see what Alex feels he has learned. And it's not in like, let's just add another thing to your curriculum and put a tick on it. It's, what did you discover? You know, because if you ignite imagination in that way, you begin to learn that you can pay attention to your own experiences, you discover every little interaction, every micro moment gives you an opportunity to unlock something new about yourself or the world. And that's where magic is at. So then the conversation isn't about, what did you screw up and how could you do better next time? Is what did you observe? What did you learn? What did the guy do that you were rolling on the mat with? You know, and so, because then it's the building respect for the uniqueness of every interaction as well.
I love that. I think that opens up such a wonderful conversation with your son, daughter, and it just opens this world of them even maybe solving their own solution and getting over what they may be holding in yoga class, so to speak, while while doing their poses. But that's wonderful that you're doing that. I wrote down notes on that, and I think people that are watching will enjoy that as well. Final few questions here. Technological advances in psychology in the world. There's a crazy show you and your husband should watch. It came out of Russia, actually. I think it's called Only Us or One of Us. I'll send it to you guys. But it's about AI becoming so big that in the future, first your AI robot's going to maybe clean your house, right? It's going to come in here and clean your home and deliver your food or whatever. Then people started having a conversation and communication and relating to a connection, just like we said, to the robot, because the robot's smart. And then this movie is about, or this show is about, actually it's a series, how people started falling in love with robots and started falling in love. And just like you could pick your car, you could now pick out a robot that you're attracted to, you know, the hair, the body, whatever. Where do you think technological advances are going towards the mind state, the psychological impact of individuals? Are people going to start falling in love with AI, loving AI more than human beings? Is this going to like disconnect personal relationships? Am I overthinking it? Like, where is this all going?
I'm looking through some notes here. I was at an event some time ago, and I thought that I was being the smartest geek of all when I've been reading this research. Let me just find it. So you've got these two things that supposedly were unique to humans, right? So let me see if I can find those two lines.
Take your time, no problem.
I really want to find it because then I had to have a humble moment right after. Right, there it is. Okay, so the angst was around that thinking is no longer the exclusive privilege of the living mind. Doo-doo, right? And then you've got like all this other stuff. I mean, the added bonus of needing to choose your life partner and piece them together to perfection. Oh my goodness. And then there was this two beats to it. Arguments around awareness-based choice selection and discretionary selection of information for attention being unique human propositions. AI can just sit there and try to organize your house and supplements, but those things apparently superhuman, only human stuff. And then I had mentioned this, quoting with confidence research, and someone in AI emailed back saying, just so you know, that is already there. That stuff about the ABCS, awareness-based choice selection, we had it since 1962. And the DSIA, old news. So then you kind of go, ooh, okay, all right, let's just pull back on the optimistic preference and accept that perhaps thinking is no longer the exclusive privilege of the living mind. We went with this amazing person, not debating, but discovering facets such as empathy and compassion and the way in which it might perhaps be relatable to a living human versus an AI thing. And again, that left a ginormous question mark on it. Apparently, we are at a place where we haven't been since writing was created in terms of influence and capacity for our ability to communicate with each other. And the biggest fear that is there is who will shape the narrative, right?
Of the next stage.
I do have full confidence, though, that my optimism isn't wasted, because us humans have been influenced, shaped, and or attempted to be dominated by all sorts of different things over time. So our capacity to set perimeters, focus where attention goes, and be the ones that drive it as opposed to be driven by this AI thing is the test, right? So I feel like for once, yeah, that's it, right? I don't know if I want to watch the show, though. It's going to burst my optimistic bias into a million pieces.
I mean, I could totally see it happening where people are, well, okay, well, you know how now when I was young, and I'm not sure your age, but you broke something, that was it. You couldn't get maybe another toy or another item. You know, your parents maybe couldn't afford it, especially where we grew up. You know, 4 TV channels. If that TV broke, you probably would not see a TV. And as you mentioned, you guys might have shared it in your town. Nowadays, it's kind of this replacement. Your phone breaks, you get a new one. Something breaks, you get a new one. No one's repairing or working on things. The divorce rate is higher than 50% nowadays and so forth. No one works on things. I could totally see robots as a substitute in some way to some individuals, not all individuals, who don't want to work on a relationship, that don't want to go through the trials of the creativity or the struggle and so forth. And because the robot knows what to tell you, how to make you feel better, they know how to manipulate in some way, understand how you want to respond at any given tonality, could probably detect voice rhythms and so forth. So in that show, it's kind of freaky, and I think you should watch it, where people are just like, why do I need to marry a wife or a husband if I can have someone that's completely understands me, you know? So yeah. I tell my wife to be careful all the time. If this comes to America, I'm out. I'm ordering myself a Tesla woman. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. All right. As we get to wrap up here, I always ask, and I think I asked Jamie as well. And you know, if you could go back in time, and we didn't talk about regret a lot, and it's such a big psychological term. Maybe you could touch a little bit on regret and how to overcome it and so forth. But if you could go back in time, is there anything that you would tell yourself as advice or change at any period of time? And what would that be?
I mean, I think, yes. And it is travel lighter. I think there's just, if I look back, there are so many assumptions and pressure points and unnecessary white noise that I'm only just beginning to realize now was not my baggage. Like they say, not my monkey, not my circus. I wish we could do a bit more of a travel light thing, because we get so ridiculously indulgent with our own idea of self-importance that we believe the world is worrying about us. And it's this insane amount of stuff to be explored in the short life we have. I look out at the moment and all I see is the Hanua Mountains and the ocean. And the world is an extraordinary place. So travel light, engage with as many awesome things that spin your wheels as possible, and try not to sit and kind of ponder too long in the negativity bias that we are all blessed with.
I love that. It's, I think oftentimes we all tend to dive too far in and worry twice. If it doesn't happen, we're worried if it happens or doesn't. And then if it happens, and then we've worried before that. So we carry a lot on our shoulders nowadays. I truly appreciate this podcast. I hope you had a good time. Don't tell Jamie. I think I liked yours more than his. He's gonna come after me. No, you both were great. Dr. Alia Bojilova. Alia, please. I have a hard time pronouncing your name. I don't know why. Please pronounce it for me with your beautiful accent.
Dr. Alia Bojilova.
Oh, so beautiful. We'll link your information below, your book. You're welcome to come on anytime. If you ever ping me and say, Simon, I have a really cool topic to talk about. I want to talk about it. If you have the time, I'm here. And best of luck. Amazing podcast. You've shared so many things. And what I loved about it in particular is you have all these little phrases that I've wrote down all over my notes here. So there's quite a lot. So I'm going to be putting them in my little journal, and hopefully next time I'm in a scenario, I'll travel light and remember to look at some mountains and water or something,
Amazing. So good spending time with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. We're going to link Alia's information below. And if you want to contact her, do you have an Instagram as well? I believe your husband does.
LinkedIn.
I'm
on LinkedIn.
She's on LinkedIn. She's keeping it professional, which is very good. We will link that below, and you could reach out to her, connect with her, and if you have any questions, also check out her book, The Resilience Toolkit, and it will give you everything you need to know in regards, or most of what you need to know in regards to being resilient, which is very important. And again, it is not a trait, it's a choice, correct? That is important. All right. Thank you.